The hardest thing a person ever learns is how to keep walking. We practice it on cold corners, past outstretched hands, past faces we'd rather not read. We get good at it. We tell ourselves we're simply in a hurry. This is the story of the day one girl made an entire city forget how to do it. Only $10 a painting. Callie Brooks raised a small canvas over her head and called it out a second time. The wind came down Harlan Street off the river, raw and wet, and a handful of people glanced over. Almost all of them kept moving. She was 13, and she had set herself up against the brick wall between a tailor's shop and a bakery, her thin gray blanket laid out carefully on the pavement. 14 small canvases sat on it in 2 neat rows. She had painted every one of them at the kitchen table after midnight, once the apartment had gone still. With the last decent brushes a woman named Sister Faith had pressed into her hands 2 winters ago. Next to the painting stood a square of cardboard, lettered in blue marker. Paintings for Holy Cross Children's Home. $10 each. A man in a long coat slowed, and Kayla looked up at him with a careful smile. Good afternoon, sir. These are all hand-painted. Every dollar goes straight to Holy Cross Children's Home. It paused. You did all of these yourself? Yes, sir. She lifted one, gently. This one's called the Saved Seat. It's a child setting a place at the table for a family that hasn't come yet. He made the light warm on purpose. I didn't want it to feel like giving up. Used, still waiting. He turned it over in his gloved hands, frowned it, and looked at the sign. $10? For something this little? Callie kept her voice even. Little enough to fit in your coat. Big enough to buy some kids their breakfast. His face softened for half a second. Then he set the painting back down. Just looking today. Thank you for stopping, Kayla said, and laid the canvas back in its place with care. A woman in a fur collar picked up a painting of 2 children huddled under one coat. She rubbed the corner with a thumb. I'll give you 6. The price is 10, ma'am. It isn't even. Frowned. It's still my work. She gave a short laugh. Charity means people give what they can spare, sweetheart. And I'm giving my work, Kayla said. $10 is the price. The woman stared, plainly thrown by the steadiness of it, then dropped the painting back onto the blanket. Good luck. A teenage boy stopped next, elbowing his friend. Joe, look at this one. Callie reached for the canvas before his fingers could smudge the wet edge. Careful, at one's still drying. It's called The Light That Stays. It's a kid watching a family leave the children's home after a visit. I painted the window gold, because even on the day you're not the one chosen, the light doesn't leave with them. It stays in the room. The boy went quiet for a second. That's actually really good. His friend picked it up, turned it twice, set it down. Bit depressing for a bedroom, though. I understand, Kayla said. More people began to pause. Not enough to buy. Used enough to look. They lifted the little canvases, tilted them toward the flat gray light, and murmured about the price. They asked whether she had a permit, whether the home even knew she was out here, whether she was truly giving the money away or just saying so. Callie answered every question politely. She had heard sharper ones. Then a hard voice cut across the small crowd. Kayla Brooks. She froze. A woman in a camel coat pushed to the front, her hair scraped into a flawless knot, her lipstick a bright slash, her eyes cold enough to make the river wind feel almost kind. Sharon Brooks. Her stepmother. She stopped in front of the blanket and looked down at the paintings the way you'd look at trash someone had spread across a clean floor. So this is where you disappeared to, Sharon said. Callie swallowed. I told you. He was raising money for Holy Cross. You told me you had chores. There are dishes in the sink, a basket of laundry in the hall, and no dinner started. Her gaze dropped to the small tin box by the sign. How much did you take in? Callie edged half a step closer to it. That money is for the children's home. I asked you how much. A woman nearby raised her brows. Is that her mom? My stepmother. Callie said quietly. Sharon bent and reached for the box. Kayla's hand closed over it first. Please don't, she said. Sharon's smile never reached her eyes. Don't you dare embarrass me out here. And the afternoon tilted, the way these things tilt, on one thoughtless sentence. A man with a phone in his hand lifted one of the canvases. Hang on. If her own stepmother had no idea she was out here, how do we even know these are hers? They're mine, Kayla said. He flipped the canvas over and inspected the back like a man hunting for a price tag. Could have grabbed them from anywhere and come down here with a sob story about orphans. A woman stepped back, the way people do when doubt turns into permission. It happens. People fake this kind of thing for cash all the time. I'm not faking anything, Kayla said. Her voice held level, but it had gone tight as wire. I grew up at Holy Cross. The tailor's door opened, and a thin older man named Victor Lowe stepped out onto the sidewalk. What's the commotion? This girl might be selling stolen paintings, the man with the phone announced. They are not stolen, Kayla said. Then prove it, someone said from the back. And Kayla looked around the ring of faces. So me doubtful. So me already enjoying the show. A few who had simply decided, the way crowds do, that the easiest story was the one that asked nothing of them at all. So she reached into her bag and pulled out a sketch pad and a stub of charcoal. If you think I stole them, she said, I'll draw something. Right now. You peek. The crowd hushed. The teenage boy pointed at the bakery window. Draw the lady at the counter. Inside, behind the glass, a round-faced woman named Ruth Delgado was sliding a tray of rolls into a case, flour dusted up to her elbows. Kayla sat on the edge of the cold stone step, balanced the pad on her knee, and started. Her hand moved fast. She caught the set of Ruth's shoulders, the careful way she held the tray, the laugh lines worn deep around her eyes, the steadiness in her mouth. For a few minutes, the whole sidewalk went silent. Even Sharon said nothing. Then Kayla turned the pad around. The boy breathed it out. Bro. That's here. Ruth Delgado came to the bakery door, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at the drawing, then at the girl who had made it. Well, Albie, she said. That's kinder to me than my own mirror is. A few people laughed, softly. The man with the phone looked away. Could have been a fluke. Callie stood. I'll draw you next. He didn't answer. Sharon had had enough. Pack it up. You're coming home. No. The word was out before Kayla could soften it. It startled even her. Sharon's face went rigid. What did you say? That money isn't yours, Kayla said, and her voice trembled, but it didn't stop. These paintings aren't yours. And Holy Cross isn't some sad story I cooked up for attention. You live under my roof. I was adopted by James and Carol Brooks. Her chin came up. Carol taught me to give what I have. James taught me to keep my back straight. You don't get to take either one of those away from me. The crowd shifted, and the air over that corner had changed. The same people who'd been so quick to doubt her were watching now as if they were seeing her for the first time. And before Sharon could answer, the people at the edge of the sidewalk parted. A tall man in a slate-gray overcoat came through the gap, unurried. Not with the eager curiosity of someone chasing a scene, but with the easy calm of a man long used to crowds opening for him. Victor Lowe straightened on reflex. Mr. Caligua. A murmur ran through the gathering. That's Daniel Calloway. The Calloway behind half the new towers downtown. The Billionaire. Daniel Calloway swept his eyes once across the faces, then settled them on the girl. Not on the paintings first. On her. On the charcoal smudged across her knuckles. On the way she stood planted between the blanket and the tin box, as if she would guard both with her own body if it came to it. What's going on here? He asked. The man with the phone finally shrugged. People are trying to figure out if those paintings are really hers. Daniel looked at Kayla. Are they? Yes, sir, she said quietly. Sharon folded her arms and produced a smooth, social smile. Mr. Caligua, this is just family business. Callie chases attention instead of doing her responsibilities. Daniel's gaze touched Sharon for one beat, then returned to the blanket. He crouched beside it, careful not to set a knee on the edge. One painting held him longer than the rest. A crowded bedroom. Rows of metal cots. A small child sitting awake on the floor in the dark, holding a frayed stuffed dog, while moonlight lay in a pale stripe across the boards. And in the corner, beneath the window, a battered little tin of paints. What do you call this one? He asked. Callie swallowed. The room that never sleeps. Danielle looked up, slightly. Why that name? Because some rooms in a children's home never really go quiet, she said. Kids whisper after lights out. Some cry, but soft, so the others won't hear it. Some may just lie there listening for footsteps in the hall, hoping somebody finally came back for them. And the paint tin, Daniel said. In the corner. Callie looked at her own work. That part matters to me most. Why? Because when I lived at Holy Cross, drawing was the only thing that ever made that room feel less lonely. Something moved behind Daniel Calloway's eyes. He didn't say what. Behind him, Sharon let out a light little laugh. She always knows how to turn everything into a tragedy. Daniel rose, slowly, and turned to face her. Did she paint these? Sharon hesitated. Half a second too long. She likes to scribble. The crowd traded glances. They had all just watched the girl draw. Daniel reached for the sketch pad on the step. Ruth Delgado's portrait gazed up at him, finished in 4 minutes, breathing on the page. You drew this just now? Yes, sir. How long did it take? 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Ruth pushed the bakery door open again. 4, she called. And she got my tired eyes exactly right. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the thinning crowd. Daniel looked back at Kayla. Where did you study? I didn't, sir. Then who taught you? Sister Faith gave me paper, back when nobody else figured a kid like me was worth handing anything to. She paused. That was most of the lesson. Daniel glanced at the cardboard sign. Holy Cross Children's Home. You grew up there. Callie nodded. A heart ghost. Came down Harlan Street and rattled the bakery glass. Without noticing she was doing it, Kayla rubbed her cold hands together. Daniel noticed. Have you eaten today? He asked. I'm all right. Her stomach answered for her, a small hollow sound. Sharon sighed, loud and theatrical. She skipped lunch running out of the house this morning like some little street act. Callie dropped her eyes for a second. The humiliation hit harder than it should have, because Sharon always knew the exact place to press. Daniel slid a hand into his coat and drew out his wallet. How much for this one? He lifted the room that never sleeps carefully, by the edges. It's $10, sir. That's all. Why only 10? Callie hesitated. 10, slowly, because people will hand over $10 a lot quicker than they'll stop and actually care for 10 minutes. $10 is easier to spare than attention. She looked at him. I'm trying to get the attention. The $10 is just the door. Daniel was quiet a moment. Then he drew out $100 bill and held it toward her. Callie blinked. Sir, I can't make change for that. I'm not asking for change. Then it's only 10, then write down 10 for the painting, he said, and 90 as a donation. Sharon stepped in at once. I'll keep that safe for her. Daniel didn't even glance at her open hand. No, ma'am. Callie took the bill carefully, her fingers still unsteady from the accusations. She opened a small notebook and wrote, in clear letters, Daniel Calloway. $100. Painting, 10. Donation, 90. For food, coats, and art supplies. Daniel watched her write down every word. You keep records, he said. I don't ever want anyone wondering where the money went. He closed the wallet slowly. That notebook holds more honesty than half the ledgers I've put my name to. Victor Lowe coughed into his fist and discovered something fascinating down the block. Charon recovered the smile. Mr. Caligua, Kayla does get carried away with these little emotional projects. Daniel looked straight at her. Keeping children warm through the winter is not a little project. Sharon's face went flat. It turned back to Kayla. Will you let me buy you a hot chocolate? We can sit by the window. Your paintings stay right where you can watch them. Charon answered before Kayla could. She's coming home. Kayla lifted her head. No. It came out steadier this time. A few people exchanged looks. The same crowd that had doubted her stood watching now, as if something they had no name for was unfolding right there, on an ordinary cold corner, in the last gray light of a winter afternoon. Ruth Delgado opened the bakery door wider. Come on in, honey, before those hands turned to stone. Kayla bent and squared up the paintings on the blanket one last time. And she noticed something odd as she did it. Nobody touched them now. The same hands that had pawed at her work 20 minutes earlier stayed at people's sides. Charon stood a few feet off, furious and embarrassed in equal measure. You're making a mistake, she muttered. Kayla looked at her a long moment. Maybe, she said softly. But at least it'll be mine. Then she followed Daniel Calloway into the warmth, while the cold river wind swept down Harlan Street and lifted the edge of the gray blanket like a small flag refusing to fold. Inside, the heat folded around her all at once. After hours in the wind, even the smell of bread and coffee felt almost unreal. Ruth steered them to a small table by the front window. You sit right there, where you can keep an eye on your work. And don't fight me on the hot chocolate. It's already on its way. Thank you, Kayla murmured. Daniel waited until she had sat before taking the chair across from her. It rested the room that never sleeps against the wall beside the table, upright, the way you set down something you mean to keep, not something bought on a whim. A tall mug arrived crowned with whipped cream. Ruth set it down gently. You need real food too. Soap's coming. Oh, I can't pay for, good thing I didn't ask. Ruth glanced at Daniel. You'd be the reason half this street suddenly remembered it owns a conscience, wouldn't you? Daniel gave the faintest smile. I don't think they'd thank you for saying it like that. Truth doesn't stop being true because it stings, Ruth said, and walked off before either could answer. For a moment Kayla just held the mug in both hands, letting the warmth sink in. Daniel watched quietly. Not the way some wealthy men watch a person they've already decided to rescue. The way someone watches when he's still listening, still working out what actually matters. You really grew up at Holy Cross, he said. From 5 until I was 11. Then James and Carol adopted me. Her voice softened on the second name. Carol passed last spring. Daniel's expression changed. I'm sorry. She was kind. The kind who remembered the small things. That I hated mushrooms. That I loved warm bread with too much honey. A faint smile. She used to say, when a child trusts you enough to tell you what frightens them, you handle it like something sacred. Daniel leaned back. She sounds wiser than most of the people I sit across from in meetings. A small laugh slipped out of Kayla before she could stop it. It startled her enough that she looked embarrassed right after. That's the first time you've smiled since I walked up, Daniel said. The smile faded almost as quickly. Her eyes drifted to the window, where Sharon stood arguing with Victor Lowe on the sidewalk. She'll be angry when I get home, Kayla admitted. Your stepmother. Yes. Daniel nodded once, as though he understood more about that than he meant to say. Ruth came back with tomato soup and half a grilled cheese. Kayla opened her mouth to refuse, and Ruth just pointed a spoon at her. Eat first. Breathe later. Yes, ma'am. The soup went faster than Kayla intended. Half wet throat, she realized Daniel had seen exactly how hungry she'd been pretending not to be. You don't look after yourself, he said quietly. She looked uncomfortable. The kids at Holy Cross need things more than I do. That answer worries me more than it impresses me. She blinked at him. He folded his hands loosely on the table. People who spend their whole lives looking after everyone else usually end up convinced they're the least important person in any room they walk into. Callie lowered her spoon. No one had ever put it to her like that. Daniel glanced toward the window, toward the blanket. How long have you been painting? Since I was little. Since Holy Cross. A faint, far-off smile. Sister Faith caught me drawing on the backs of old hymn sheets, because we'd run out of paper. Instead of taking them away, she dug up a paint tin somebody had donated. Alf, the colors were dried hard. She shook her head. I thought it was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned. Daniel looked at the painting against the wall. The small tin in the corner. Callie nodded. That's the one. The bakery had grown quieter around them, the late crowd thinning, leaving the low clink of trays and the murmur from the counter. Daniel studied her a moment before he spoke again. Tell me honestly. How bad is Holy Cross right now? Callie hesitated. Worse than Sister Faith lets on, she said finally. Too many kids, not enough beds. The heat fails on the coldest nights, and they hand out extra blankets and pretend it's a sleepover. So many of the little ones are sharing coats, because the donations dried up this year. She paused. Last week, Theo asked me if colored pencils counted as school supplies or toys. Because he didn't want to be the reason they spent money on the wrong kind of thing. Who's Theo? He's 6. Her smile turned sad. He sleeps with his shoes on. He's afraid that if somebody comes in the night to take a kid away, he won't have time to find them in the dark. Daniel looked away, briefly, toward the window. He asked me something a few nights ago, Kayla went on, softly. He asked whether kids get sent off somewhere when a children's home runs out of money. The question settled heavily on the little table. Daniel let out a slow breath. And what did you tell him? That I wouldn't let that happen. But you don't actually know whether you can keep that promise. Callie looked down into the soup. No. And for the first time since he'd walked into that bakery, something in Daniel Calloway's face went unguarded. Not the practiced warmth of a man at a fundraiser. Not calculation. Something closer to regret. My grandmother raised me, he said quietly. We didn't have much, for a long stretch. There were a couple of winters where the heat in our building was more of a rumor than a fact. A faint, distant smile. She used to say the cold doesn't care how hard you're working to get out of it. It just keeps coming, every night, the same. Callie listened, very still. She told me something once. He was maybe 12. He turned the mug slowly in his hands. She said the day you make it warm, and you forget the people still out in the cold, is the day you stopped being worth the trouble of getting warm. He looked up at Kayla. I hadn't thought about that line in 30 years. And then I crouched down on Harlan Street and looked at a painting of a room that never sleeps. Outside, Sharon finally turned and walked off down the sidewalk, not once looking back. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked, when you sell all 15 paintings, what happens? That's the actual plan? Callie wrapped her hands tighter around the mug. It buys a week, maybe. Breakfast for the little ones. A few new coats. She said it plainly, without drama, the way a person states a fact she has already made peace with. I know 15 paintings can't fix a building. I'm not stupid about it. I didn't say you were. But if I sell them out here, on the street, somebody has to look at the sign. And maybe one of those somebodies remembers, later, at the home is even there. She turned the mug slowly. Most of those kids have figured out the world doesn't see them. I'm just trying to make us harder to not see. Daniel said nothing for a long moment. He had built towers people could see from across the river, and he was not sure any of them had ever made anyone harder to overlook. Callie watched Sharon shrink and vanish around the corner. Relief came, mixed strangely with guilt. Daniel caught the look. You don't owe anyone an apology for standing up for yourself. I know. She wrapped her hands around the mug again. I'm just not used to doing it. He reached into his coat, took out a business card, and slid it across the table. I'd like to come see Holy Cross tomorrow, he said. Kayla looked at the card but didn't pick it up yet. You don't have to decide right now, Daniel added. And I'm not bringing anyone. No cameras. No reporters. No picture of me handing a kid a check. You really want to see it? Yes. Why? His eyes moved, just for a second, to the painting leaning against the wall. Because that room you painted, he said. Nobody paints loneliness that exactly, unless they've lived inside it. Callie looked down at the card for a long moment. Then she picked it up. Outside the window, the gray blanket still lay on the sidewalk in the fading light, ringed by small paintings most of the city had nearly walked straight past without ever seeing. Callie left the bakery after sunset, the gray blanket folded under one arm, the tin box zipped tight inside her bag. The air of the river had turned colder, carrying the smell of coming rain. Daniel walked beside her toward the lot across the street, still carrying the room that never sleeps against his coat. You don't have to walk me, Kayla said. When people do that, it usually means they think I can't handle myself. Daniel glanced at her. You handled a whole hostile crowd this afternoon, by yourself. You think you'll be fine? It paused. I'm walking with you because I want to. There's a difference, and you ought to start letting yourself hear it. She looked down a second, hiding a small smile. At the edge of the lot, a dark car idled under a street lamp. A driver stepped out the moment he saw Daniel. It's all right, Marcus, Daniel said. Give me a minute. Callie stopped. You really carry the paintings around yourself? Daniel looked at the canvas. Most things people sell me end up forgotten in some office. He glanced at it. This one won't. The answer embarrassed her more than any compliment could have. He set the painting inside the car, upright, gentle. When he turned back, Kayla was looking across the street, where a quieter figure had appeared at the corner. A man in his 50s, in a worn jacket, hands deep in his pockets. Her whole posture shifted. That's my dad, she said. James. It reached them before she could explain. He looked at the car, at the famous man beside his daughter, and then only at Kayla. Your stepmother called, he said. Told me you were making a scene downtown. His eyes moved over her. The cold reddened hands, the thin jacket, the charcoal still on her fingers. And whatever he saw there softened something in him. But that's no scene. That's just you. Doing the same thing you've always done. Kayla's voice came out small. Are you angry? No. His jaw worked. I'm ashamed. Not of you. He glanced, in the direction Sharon had gone. Of how long I've let things slide in that house without saying a word. Your mother would have had plenty to say to me about that. It was not a grand speech. James was not a man of grand speeches. But Kayla had waited a long time to hear even that much. Daniel watched the whole thing without a word. When James finally turned to him, Daniel simply put out his hand. Your daughter is the most honest person I've met in a long time, he said. I'd like your blessing to help the home she grew up in. No strings. No press. James shook it slowly. She was never short on being good, he said. What she's short on is people who stop making it so hard. The next morning, Daniel Calloway came to Holy Cross Children's Home, exactly as he had said he would. No cameras. No entourage. Just a man, and his driver waiting at the curb, and a girl meeting him at a peeling front door. The building told its own story before anyone spoke. Water stains spread across the upstairs ceilings in brown maps. A radiator clanked uselessly in the front hall. The windows were old and loose, taped against the cold the tape had long stopped holding back. In the common room, a single space heater glowed in the corner, ringed by chairs, the way people once ringed a fire. And yet it was clean. Swept and scrubbed and cared for, the way a thing is cared for by people who have almost nothing and refuse to let that show on the children. Sister Faith met them in the hall. She was old, and small, and entirely unimpressed by money. "So," she said, looking up at the famous man in the grey coat. "You're the one who's got Michaela thinking the world might be paying attention." "I'm trying to be," Daniel said. "Trying." Sister Faith nodded slowly, as though she'd heard the word before from richer men, and watched it amount to nothing. "We'll see." She walked him through it herself. She didn't soften it, and she didn't oversell it. She just showed him. The room of metal cots. The corner where the cold bit worst. The closet of shared coats, fewer than the children who needed them. The chip table where the older kids did homework under a lamp they passed around. And Daniel followed, and looked at everything, and said almost nothing. Then a small boy appeared in a doorway, watching. Shoes on, laces tied, though it was nearly bedtime. "That's Theo," Kayla said softly. The boy studied the tall stranger, then walked right up to him, the way only the very young dare. "Are you here to fix the heat?" he asked. Daniel crouched to his level. "I'm thinking about it." "Does it need fixing?" Theo considered this seriously. "On the cold nights, you can see your own breath in the bedroom," he said. "We pretend it's a camp-out. But everybody knows it's not really a camp-out." Daniel was quiet a moment. "No," he said. "It isn't." "That's what I think too," Theo agreed. Then, the matter settled, he wandered off, shoes squeaking on the floor, pausing once at the door to make sure the stranger was still watching. Daniel rose slowly. He looked at the loose windows, the bronze-stained ceiling, the lonely space heater. And when he turned to Sister Faith, the polite distance had gone out of his face entirely. "I'm not going to write a check and disappear," he said. "I've done that, at other places, and watched the money vanish into a building and change nothing. That isn't what this will be." Sister Faith crossed her arms. "Then what will it be?" "Heat first. Before the next hard freeze, not after. Then the windows. Then the beds, and the coats, and a real studio room, with paper that doesn't run out." It paused. "And then I'm going to keep coming back, on ordinary days when nothing's being unveiled, until you're tired of the sight of me." Sister Faith looked at him a long, weighing moment. Then something in her old face eased. "Well," she said. "We'll see about the tired of you part." But she was nearly smiling. It kept the promise in the order he had given it. The heat came first. A crew arrived within days, and on. The first truly cold night after, the children went to bed in a building that held its warmth, and a few of them slept the whole night through for the first time in a long while, which is a strange and wonderful thing, to sleep soundly because of a furnace. In the morning, the youngest ones pressed their hands flat against the warm radiators in the hall and laughed, as if the building itself had finally decided to be on their side. Then the windows. Then the floors, leveled at last, so the cots stopped rocking. Then a real studio room, with a long table and good light and shelves of paper that did not run out, and a hand-lettered sign on the door that Theo insisted on making himself, slightly crooked. And Daniel Calloway did the thing he had said he would do, the thing the cameras never stay for. It kept showing up. It came on plain Tuesdays when nothing was being unveiled. He learned the children's names, and which ones were shy, and which would talk his ear off about outer space. He let Theo hand him a drawing once, a picture of Holy Cross under a fat orange sun, with a tall man in a grey coat out front holding a wrench bigger than his arm. "You gave me a beard," Daniel said, studying it. Theo frowned it. "You don't have a beard?" The room came apart laughing. And Daniel laughed too, fully, the way a man laughs when something locked has finally come open in him. Callie watched it from across the room. And she understood that something had shifted in him since that first cold afternoon on Harlan Street. Powerful men, in her experience, walked into a place expecting to be admired. Daniel Calloway had walked into this one and somehow let himself be changed instead. That was rarer than money. The studio room became hers, in a quiet way no one had to declare. After school, the smaller children began drifting in to find her there, and she taught them the way Sister Faith had once taught her. Not with rules. With paper, and patience, and the radical little idea that what a child made was worth keeping. Theo painted the same orange sun over and over, until the wall behind the table held a row of them. And Daniel, when he saw it, did not photograph it or frame it or fold it into a story for a gala. It just stood there a while, looking, and then quietly arranged for the studio to stay funded for as long as the home stood, in the name of a woman named Carol Brooks, who had taught a girl that giving was a kind of language. Kayla didn't learn about that part for months. A had asked them not to tell her. Word got out, the way word does in a city, slowly and then all at once. And here was the thing none of them quite expected. It was not Daniel's money that moved people. It was the shame of having walked past for so long. Neighbors started coming. Not reporters, just people, carrying boxes. Books. Coats. Canned food. Toys. School supplies. Victor Lowe tailored a warm winter jacket for every child in the place, then muttered something unconvincing about clearing out old fabric, and nobody believed him, and Sister Faith thanked him anyway. The teenage boy from Harlan Street came back with his mother, carrying art supplies and two of Kayla's paintings, framed now, that they'd gone back and bought. Even the man with the phone turned up one afternoon with cases of soup stacked to his chin, and refused, flatly, to explain himself. The city did not turn perfect. Cities don't. But shame, it turns out, can move people that comfort never will. 3 weeks after that first cold afternoon, a hard freeze rolled in, and at Holy Cross it no longer woke the children in fear. It woke them in warmth. It held in the halls. Fresh paint covered the upstairs walls. The loose old windows were gone. The cots sat level and steady. And for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the building smelled less of damp and more of dinner. Ruth Delgado had taken to bringing trays of warm rolls, and pretending she wasn't tearing up every time she looked around. I hate emotional renovations, she muttered. You've teared up 4 times today, said a boy at the table, helpfully. 5, corrected another, proud of his count. Ruth pointed a roll at them both. 1 more number out of either of you, and you're scrubbing pans till spring. It was on an evening like that, with the freeze pressing at the new windows, and the halls holding their heat, that Daniel asked Kayla to come outside for a minute. She frowned. Why? You'll see. The children tried to follow until Sister Faith clapped once, sharply. Nobody stampedes the billionaire. What if he needs backup? A boy protested. He has Marcus for that, Sister Faith said, and the driver, by the door, looked genuinely wounded. Outside, the cold came up the river, and the lights were flickering on across the street. A small crowd had gathered near the sidewalk. Neighbors. Workers. People from the nearby shops. And there, near the curb, beneath a cloth covering something nearly 6 feet tall, stood a shape Kayla had plainly not expected. She stopped walking. Daniel. It looked, for the first time since she'd met him, almost nervous. A few people wanted to thank you, he said quietly. For what? Nobody answered right away. Then Victor Lowe stepped forward, awkward, turning his cap in his hands. Keith, he said. This whole street spent years walking past problems that weren't convenient to look at. It cleared his throat, roughly. You made us stop. I still don't know how you did it with a blanket and some $10 paintings. But you did. The teenage boy grinned. My mom cried over your paintings for like 3 days. I did not, his mother said, weakly. You completely did. Ruth Delgado appeared at Kayla's side, pulling her coat tighter. That little sidewalk stand of yours, she said, shamed half this city into remembering children exist. Kayla already looked overwhelmed. I didn't do any of this alone. No, Daniel said softly. But you're the one who started it. Before she could answer, Theo grabbed the edge of the cloth. Can I pull it? Danielle looked at Kayla first. She stared at the covered shape, her chest tight. What is it? A reminder, Daniel said. Theo yanked the cloth down before anyone could get more emotional than strictly necessary. The crowd went quiet. It was a bronze sculpture. And Kayla went completely still. The statue showed a girl sitting cross-legged on a sidewalk. A brush in one hand. A small canvas in the other. Beside her, a tin donation box and a cardboard sign. Paintings for Holy Cross Children's Home. $10 each. But it was the face that took the air out of her lungs. Not sadness. Not pity. Determination. The quiet, stubborn kind people carry after surviving things nobody ever claps for. At the base, a bronze plaque caught the streetlight. She would not lower her price. Not on her work, and not on their worth. For several seconds, Kayla could not speak. When she did, her voice broke. Daniel. You shouldn't have done this. Yes, he said calmly. I should have. She looked around at the crowd. Workers. Children. Neighbors. People who had once stepped over her paintings without slowing. And now they stood together in the cold lamplight, looking at a bronze likeness of a girl who had spent most of her life believing she had to make herself small to be allowed any room in the world. And the tears came, finally, the ones she had held back through the doubt and the cold. Not from sadness. From the strange, overwhelming weight of being seen. James stepped up beside his daughter, quiet. Your mother would have lost her mind over this, he said. Callie laughed through the tears. Carol would have said the statue made my hair look too neat. That too. Off at the edge of the gathering, Sharon stood apart. Silent. Uncomfortable. Watching a city honor the very thing she had spent years calling weakness. But nobody was looking toward Sharon anymore. The story had simply moved past her, the way a river moves past a stone. Theo tugged at Kayla's sleeve. Miss Kayla. She wiped quickly beneath her eyes. Yeah, Buddy. He pointed up at the statue. You look brave. Callie stared at the bronze version of herself a long moment. Then she crouched to his level. No, honey, she said softly. Brave was every kid in that building who kept hoping the grown-ups would finally care. He just held up a sign. And Daniel Calloway watched her with the same expression he'd worn that first afternoon on Harlan Street, kneeling beside a blanket, holding a painting of a room that never sleeps. Recognition. Because Kayla still didn't fully understand the truth of it. The city had not changed because a billionaire opened his wallet. It changed because a 13-year-old girl sat down on a cold sidewalk, refused to let invisible children stay invisible, and would not lower her price. Not on her work. Not on their worth. Above them, the first holiday lights of the season flickered on across the city. And through the new windows of Holy Cross, windows that no longer let in the cold, came the sound of children laughing. For the first time in a very long time, the children inside that building did not sound temporary. They sounded like they were home. Sometimes the world does not change because of powerful people. It changes because one ordinary person refuses to walk past suffering in silence, and keeps refusing, until the silence itself becomes impossible to bear. This story is a reminder that kindness is not weakness, and that compassion is nothing to be ashamed of. Children do not need perfect heroes. They need adults who choose to see them, to protect them, and to care, before it is too late to matter. And it reminds us that a single small act of courage, even something as ordinary as a $10 painting on a folded gray blanket, can wake the conscience of an entire city. We spend so much of our lives learning how not to see. The hardest, and the bravest, thing a person can do is simply to stop. To look. And then to refuse to keep walking. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson underneath all of it. That you do not need a fortune to begin. You need only a single, stubborn refusal to pretend you didn't notice. The fortune, when it comes, is just the city catching up to a courage one ordinary child had all along, on a cold corner, with a blanket and a sign. This is a work of fiction, created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are imagined. They do not represent any real people, or any true story. This content is intended for storytelling and reflection only.